Oh, distraction.
Yes. And this is one where it's distraction to the next level, where if my mind can zoom in on a different sound.
100%. So that's what I did with this one family where
Yeah.
they had music in the background. And the child loved
Yes.
music and he
Yes.
loved a specific group. I can't remember what the group was,
Yeah.
but one way we worked with them is we had the music and we would work on disconnecting from dad's breathing to the music. And so that helped. And it sounds exactly with what you did.
Yes, yes. So misophonia is a
Yep.
sensory
Yep.
problem that is triggering
Yep.
emotions. And if we change the senses, we can corrupt this whole
Yeah.
process. So
I
it,
think
it
we
might not
figured it
even
out
happen.
doing this.
Creating different sounds can be helpful. Sometimes blocking the sound, sometimes creating different sounds. And this is where, one of the ways in which these noise canceling headphones that are much more common, what they're doing is they're taking sounds that are coming in and sort of creating the opposite sound and sort of pushing it out so you don't really
So how
hear
is
it.
that different from
I,
when, let's say, you're flying on an airplane, right? And there's been a lot of flight
yeah,
phobia lately with everything happening. You put them on, you listen to
yeah,
calming music to get out the sound of the engine of the plane. It's no different.
sure. It's no different. It's no different, and our world is becoming so much more, noisy, quite literally. We're living in more congested places, there's more so much stuff is happening, there's so much literal noise in the environment that this direction is a good direction of all the noise canceling stuff that's available. I think given the direction that AI is headed, and in 5 years or so, our products for noise canceling are gonna be so good that we're gonna be able to hyper focus in on certain noises that bother us, and we might be able to kinda wipe away this problem. I hope. I hope we might be able to in many situations, you could train your noise canceling headphones that, it's really this specific sound that bothers me. Can you just delete that? And I think we might be able to do it. The other big thing I want to mention, Doctor, we mentioned a lot about exposure, desensitization, blocking out, tuning into different sounds. One more thing that's really important here is on the anger front. What I found really helpful is when you think about anger and approaching anger-based problems, there's a lot of things that can help. So sometimes if you're angry and the anger makes sense, you want to actually take action on it. I mean, one of the reasons why anger exists is to break us out of our everyday norm and to do something to address an injustice, to do something to address how you're being blocked in some way, right? So anger is an emotion that's really built for action. But if you're experiencing anger related to your dad's breathing, you don't really feel like you have much you can do. So that anger has to be addressed. So one way that you address it as a parent is to say, if I experienced the world in the way that you do, I would be reacting exactly the same way. And I am so sorry that this thing I am doing is making you so upset. It's not your fault. If I heard sounds this way too, it would make me really upset. And I wouldn't want to go to dinner. I wouldn't want to do this. I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to be near me. You gotta acknowledge the anger. And as you start doing that, the person might change the way they're experiencing the anger too.
Yeah.
Because now I'm not the crazy one. This is not my fault. It makes sense why I'm experiencing this. You gotta deal with that anger because anger is so wired for action. And if you feel like you can't take action in this moment, it's gonna bubble up and it's gonna explode at some
No,
point.
it's really, really very, very interesting. Before we end, I'd like to talk a little bit about school and accommodations to help these
Yeah.
kids and that premise of
Yeah.
kind of comfort precedes communication. Progress doesn't happen in a group. So we have to do things kind of away from the group. In some ways, things like small groups away from the full class, if things like clicking or in specific sounds, but lunch bunch, a recess bunch, a friendship group. Sometimes removing them from that full group, which is where they're kind of overwhelmed or the sounds really get to them. That's been ways that we've worked with them. Of course, taking the specific issue that the specific child has. But what are your thoughts on that? And we've had to wear
Yeah.
the headphones a little bit in the larger groups and the assemblies, and certain sounds just made them shut down.
Yeah, this is where I think parents need to know two things. One is you have to be the advocate for your child. And many teachers might not even know what misophonia is. I mean, I'm sure, Dr. E, this is something you come
All the
across all the
time.
time, is a lot of teachers don't know what selective mutism is. They've never heard those
Or they
words.
think it's kids that are
They
choosing and refusing to speak, and therefore they're gonna do
right.
everything they can to get this kid to talk, and they'll give them bravery.
Push them.
Push to talk, you
Yeah.
gotta talk. If you don't talk, and that whole word "talk" causes their blood to curdle, because many of these kids
Yeah.
aren't there yet. Some are, and you're able to
Yeah.
talk about it, but a lot of kids just aren't there. So that's where my social communication bridge comes in, because at least they're on the bridge and we're helping them understand where
Yeah.
they're at. We're giving them the control. They're understanding their feelings. It's a beautiful thing when it works and everyone's on the same team. But it's the same with misophonia. If the teachers don't understand that and they're like, oh, he's just being difficult, or he's acting out, or he's shutting down and he's putting his head down, like he's disinterested. Does he have a learning issue? Or is the sound of the papers
Yeah.
turning that are making him crazy? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have to be an advocate. In my experience, teachers are usually in two and teachers are dealing with a lot. They're really overwhelmed. And so this is another reason why you have to be an advocate, because it's not their responsibility to figure
Yeah.
these things out, but it is a responsibility to accommodate in a appropriate way what the unique need is of their children, of the kids that they teach. So in my experience, teachers are often push, push to talk, or accommodate the
Right.
heck out of it.
Don't ask
And
questions.
that
Don't ask questions.
yes.
I'm not gonna ask
Yeah.
questions, don't worry. I won't ask.
Yeah, and that's not,
Oh,
like you said, you need a bridge here. So number 1, you have to be an advocate for your child, which means you need to know and understand this problem. The second thing is you have to experiment. So what I think is great is there's more an awareness of kids with unique needs, whether it's related to ADHD, whether it's related to autism spectrum. And I think more teachers are a little bit aware of how there is a spectrum of sensory experiences. And some kids need to tune out a little bit. Some kids might need to tune in a little bit more in different ways. So when you are struggling with misophonia in the family, there has to be some type of experimentation. And the example I'll give you, Dr. E, I've had a child that I work with who did better when they were in a lunchtime situation where there were less sounds, where they were eating more separately on their own, and they couldn't eat if they were in the
yeah,
main lunchroom and there was all that
yeah.
commotion going on. They needed to be in more silence. I've also had the exact opposite, where a child needed all the sounds to block out the little tiny
Mhm.
sounds. And so, if that same child was in a quiet environment, their brain would hone in on a unique sound and they would get disgusted. They wouldn't be able to eat. So, the accommodation for that child was actually to eat lunch outside in the playground area where they did hear all the commotion, and it made it easier for them to actually eat. So, you need a little bit of an experimentation because you don't know what is going to work, and you need a willingness to try. And so the situations I usually look out for, lunch and eating are big ones, because that's where, just statistically with misophonia, so much of the sounds are related to mouth related movements, mouth related sounds, and a lot of that just happens in eating. And if your kid isn't able to eat because they're disgusted by these sounds, well, now you have a second problem, which is they're going to be hungry, which is going to make them irritable, which is going to make the whole afternoon not go so
Yeah.
well, right? So lunchtime is a big one. The other is tests, any type of performance situation. Those are situations where it's very quiet, emotions are high because there's stress involved. And because it's so quiet and because they're so emotional, it makes it very easy for their minds to focus in on a certain sound, whether it's a tapping, whether it's a sneezing, a runny nose, whether it's someone else doing a kind of a lip smacking situation. So fortunately, a lot of teachers they're aware of learning related accommodations for testing in a different environment or extended time on tests or wearing kind of a noise blocking, oh, what do we call those, not noise blocking headphones, but those oh, they're just they're like the what construction workers wear that just kind of block out sounds.
Not the noise canceling headphones?
I guess we call them noise canceling headphones. They're not powered. There's no on off
Yeah.
switch. It's just a thing you wear that kind of
Yeah.
blocks out a lot of sounds. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this problem. So you got to be a good advocate. You got to be willing to experiment. And the last thing, and I think this is one of the hardest things, is we need to empower the kids in our lives to be their own advocate. Because you can have the best accommodation in the world, you can figure out what works, but if the teacher is busy and the child isn't able to advocate for themselves, the accommodation might not happen. And so as children get
Absolutely.
older and they're in the age where they can advocate, this is where we get back to anxiety is let's empower you with the words. Let's practice how to say them. Let's work together so that you and the teacher have a good relationship when you need these accommodations that you can ask for them. It's this collection of stuff that I think we really need to do to set up our kids for
No, for
success.
sure. Any last minute tidbits you wanna give our listeners before we end this?
These things go up and down and change and they evolve. Once my wife and I had a conversation about it, she felt so bad and she had no idea that this was happening. And I felt so bad because through that conversation I learned she's not she's not just flossing in this way to torture me. It's something for some reason that her family always did together and it relaxed them, and so what we did is we started when she was going to floss. Number one, she gave me a heads up, so it was never a surprise. During that time, she went all the way to the other side of the room. We tried to turn the volume up on the TV, and so much of what helped me is just feeling like she cared and she was
Yep.
trying. Because then I wasn't angry at her, we were both angry at this
Yeah.
problem. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't her fault. It just is. And we were working together to figure it out. In a week, maybe now this comes up coming up in a way that makes it hard for me, maybe like once or twice now, when it used to be daily and I was suffering in silence. And I think the same thing is true of many of my patients is it evolves. It goes up and down and it changes. So just because you're struggling with this right now doesn't mean you're going to be struggling in this way forever. It just means it's the way it is right now.
And I think the way you talk about it, like I can picture, the dad and the child like coming together and the dad making like humor often works really well with a lot of kids. So the dad goes
Yeah.
as a breathing and like desensitizing, kind of like making light of it, but seriousness, but kind of detaching from it and being open about it. Like, dad, it's happening again. I'm going to go in the other
Yeah.
room and just kind of dealing with that pink elephant in the room. So rather than build that resentment, that anger on both sides. So I think there's a lot of messages here for our families. And I think a lot of people learned a lot. And we're definitely going to share your wonderful resources because you've got so many, honestly, on there.
Yeah, come together to work on this problem together. I think that's the big
Absolutely.
message here. Don't take it
No,
personally. It's not. Yeah, it's believe me, no one wants to be feeling this
but
way.
it's like all these things
Um,
in mental health. I mean, if you don't acknowledge it exists, how can you overcome something?